welcome to Middle of the Road with Carla, where I have a lifetime of stories to share with you. So, today I'd like to share another dating story with you. As I had mentioned in a previous video, between my two marriages, I was single for 10 years, and so I was on some online dating sites. Now, this is back when dating sites were just starting to become um, run of the mill. At first, it was like just some place that you avoided or never admitted to being on, but it was this is when it was starting to really just kind of become mainstream. So this story starts right after I was just out of a rather what's the word, traumatic, dysfunctional relationship that I had been in for about 1 year prior. And I was kind of licking my wounds. I'd gotten myself involved with somebody who was not at all who he had appeared to be. That's a whole other story. And so I was kind of licking my wounds, but I was on this particular dating site called eHarmony. And I don't know if it still works the same or if you're familiar with it, but eHarmony was a little bit more of an upscale kind of dating site. And the way they worked it was you had sort of a graduated approach to how you could talk to people. So you filled out an extensive kind of questionnaire, and then they would match you with other people and who had answered or showed similarities um, when it came to the way they answered their question, or they'd match you up. Then the first thing that you could do was you could exchange multiple choice questions. So the person, and you could choose which questions, but the person had a set number of or types of responses that they could give. And then you would get those responses, and based on those, you would decide, okay, do I want to take it to the next step or not? And then eventually, as you went through that process, then you got to open-ended questions, and then you were able to actually communicate with each other and exchange emails and whatever and decide whether or not you wanted to meet in person. So if you decided that there was something that you didn't like, then you could just shut down the conversation. There was no ability for the other person to ask you questions or say, hey, what happened? And that's intentional so that you are feeling secure that you can just make a decision and move on. So I had gone through that process with a couple of people, but I never really made it past the multiple choice questions. And I really think that the reason for that was because this was about 6 months after this dysfunctional relationship. I was still very raw and very, very distrusting. I I had gotten hurt so bad that I was looking for any excuse, any reason to kind of blow somebody off. So that's kind of what happened. And then, so that had been going on for, it was about the first 6 months. And then I kind of backed away from online dating a little bit just to give myself some room to breathe and start dealing with the issues that had come out of this relationship. And then I was on a different site, a different dating site, and I saw this man's picture and I thought, oh, he looks kind of cute. Now, he was about an hour and a half away from where I was living, but I thought, well, it's not ideal. I prefer somebody that was local, but it's not impossible. It's not an impossibility. So on this particular site, you could just either start off with, you could either start off with a full-fledged email question, or you could send a smile or a kiss, or you could do whatever you wanted. So the way I would usually approach it is I would just send a smile and see if there was any reaction to it. And then if somebody, wasn't interested at all, they just ignore you and you move on. So I had sent a smile to this person, and he responded fairly quickly. And we had a quick conversation, I would say, like over the next day or two. It was just talking about where he was living, what he was interested in, where he was at in his life, where I was at in my life, just to kind of see, okay, does this person sound totally crazy or what? Because one of the things I had learned with online dating was not to spend too much time online chatting with them, because you really can't tell anything until you meet someone. And I have a whole story around that too. That's for another time. But I had learned already that it's best just to meet. Don't invest a whole lot of time in someone until you have a chance to meet. So he felt the same way, and so we quickly set up a date. Now, usually, what I would do is I would meet somebody at a local coffee shop. I would get them there before them. I would make sure that they knew I had half an hour, that I had other plans. And this was to kind of safeguard that if I got myself in a situation that was really uncomfortable or even dangerous or whatever, that I would have an easy way to kind of get out of there and they would know that somebody was waiting for me. And it just avoided a whole lot of awkwardness. So, but in this situation, because he lived an hour and a half away, I'm getting kind of cold here. I'm going to just throw on my jacket, sorry, or my sweater. And so, because he lived an hour and a half away, of course, I felt bad, that he would come for a half-hour coffee. So I decided to take a chance, and we made a dinner date for Friday night. So I get there, and he walks in and seems normal. He's taken the appropriate amount of preparation for the date. He looked like, he had taken some time to present himself, put his best foot forward. And we had a nice dinner. We had great conversation. It wasn't overly awkward or anything like that. And then we decided that when dinner was over, we decided that we would go to a movie. That's when I did something that I had never done before. I broke one of my cardinal rules and a safety rule, and I don't recommend you do this at all. But I got in his vehicle with him to go to the movie. I'm not really quite sure why I did that. I'd like to say, I just knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I was safe. That's not true. I just did it and didn't think about it until afterwards and went, oh, that wasn't very smart. But anyway, so we went to the theater and we looked around to see what was playing. And there was really nothing that really caught either of our eyes. So at that point, we then decided to go to the local coffee shop and have that coffee to finish off our evening. I'm not sure how long we were there, but it was a fair amount of time. And we were really hitting it off. And at one point I was looking at him and thinking, oh my goodness, I kind of like him. And he's normal and he's intelligent. And wow. So anyway, we talked for quite a while. And then we got in his vehicle and he took me back to the restaurant where my vehicle was. And that was the beginning of our relationship. And in fact, that was the beginning of the relationship with my second husband. Second and last, by the way. And so anyway, fast forward probably about 2 or 3 weeks. And then he comes up to me. Let's call him Ron. At that point, he was not my husband, so I can't say my husband came up to me. We'll call him Ron just to protect his privacy. And so, even though he's not a Ron at all. But anyway, so Ron comes up to me and says, "Do you realize that you kicked me to the curb once already?" I said, "What are you talking about?" Well, he had been on eHarmony and he had went in, it was about a month into us dating, and he had went in to turn off the notifications because he wanted to see where our relationship was going to go. And he noticed one of the pictures of one of the women that he had been matched with, and it was me. And apparently, about 6 months prior to that, we had been matched on eHarmony. We had exchanged the multiple choice questions, and then I shut him down. And there was something in how he had responded that I didn't like. And so I had cut off the communication, and he never knew why. So anyway, that is how I accidentally dumped my husband. I dumped him before he was my husband, but I accidentally dumped my husband. And now it's the joke in our relationship about how I kicked him to the curb, and I didn't even know it. It was really kind of weird. And the strangest part was the picture that he used on both sites, it was the same picture. Like it didn't clue in or whatever. But I firmly believe that the reason that happened was because I was not ready for a serious relationship the 6 months after that disastrous one ended, because um, I just was not in a headspace or an emotional place to handle a relationship. And even at the year mark, when we did finally actually start dating, there were still a lot of residual issues left over from that other relationship that we had to work through. So things happen for a reason, and it worked out the way it did because that's the way it was supposed to work out. And yeah, so that's my dating story.